The Johnson family appeared to be the embodiment of the American dream. John and Emily Johnson lived in a charming suburban home with their two children, Sarah, a bright and curious 10-year-old, and Michael, a playful 6-year-old who adored his older sister. To outsiders, they were the picture-perfect family, with John holding a stable job in finance and Emily managing a successful home-based business selling handmade crafts. They were well-liked in their close-knit community, often seen attending local events, volunteering at school functions, and hosting friendly gatherings. John was the quintessential family man. He was known for his friendly demeanor, always ready with a smile or a helping hand. Whether it was fixing a neighbor's fence or coaching Michael's little league team, John was there, embodying the kind of neighbor everyone wanted. Emily, equally beloved, was the heart of the family, known for her warm personality and creative talents. Her crafts were a hit at local markets, and she had a reputation for throwing the best birthday parties for the children, complete with handmade decorations and home-baked treats. The Johnson children were equally admired. Sarah, with her love for reading and knack for solving puzzles, was often seen as wise beyond her years, while Michael's boundless energy and infectious laughter made him a favorite among his peers. Together, they seemed to have a life filled with love, laughter, and security. Yet beneath this seemingly flawless exterior, subtle cracks were beginning to form, cracks that most wouldn't notice unless they looked closely. John had become increasingly distant over the past few months. Though he still participated in family activities and community events, those closest to him sensed a change. His smiles seemed forced, his laughter hollow, and there were times when he appeared lost in thought, his gaze distant and troubled. Emily had noticed these changes too. She loved John deeply and was proud of the life they had built together, but his recent behavior concerned her. There were nights when he would stay up late, sitting alone in the dark, nursing a glass of whiskey. He had become more irritable, snapping at small things that wouldn't have bothered him before. Whenever she asked if something was wrong, John would brush her off, insisting he was just stressed from work. Despite her growing unease, Emily tried to dismiss her fears, attributing them to the natural ups and downs of life. She focused on keeping the household running smoothly, making sure the children were happy and their routines uninterrupted. She hoped that whatever was troubling John would pass, that they would return to the harmonious life they had always known. Meanwhile, John's internal turmoil was intensifying. The weight of his secret was becoming unbearable, and the reappearance of a ghost from his past had shattered the delicate balance he had managed to maintain for so long. Every interaction with his family reminded him of the precariousness of his situation, the terrifying reality that everything he loved could be taken away in an instant if his secret ever came to light. As John wrestled with his demons, Emily continued to put on a brave face for the sake of their children, unaware that their seemingly perfect world was on the brink of unraveling. The community, friends, and even Emily herself remained oblivious to the storm brewing within John. A storm that, when unleashed, would change their lives forever. John's secret had been buried deep for years, a dark chapter of his life that he believed would never resurface. Before he became the loving husband and father that everyone knew, John had lived a very different life. In his youth, he was involved in a criminal enterprise, part of a group that carried out illegal operations. One of these operations had gone terribly wrong, resulting in a crime so severe that John had no choice but to flee, assuming a new identity and leaving his old life behind. When he met Emily, John saw a chance to start over. He built a new life, one filled with love and hope. And for a while, it seemed his past had been left behind. But secrets have a way of catching up, and John's was no exception. It started with a phone call, a voice from his past that he hadn't heard in years. The voice belonged to Mark, one of his old associates who had served time for their collective crimes while John had escaped. Mark had tracked him down and was now demanding compensation for his silence. The threat was clear. If John didn't comply, Mark would expose him. The consequences were unthinkable. Not only would John face legal repercussions, but he would also lose everything: his family, his reputation, and the life he had worked so hard to build. The mere thought of Emily and the children finding out about his past was unbearable. Mark's demands were relentless, and John felt trapped. He couldn't go to the police, as doing so would unearth his past and validate Mark's claims. He couldn't confide in Emily either. The shame and fear of losing her paralyzed him. Each day, the weight of his secret grew heavier, and his ability to hide his anxiety from Emily and the kids weakened. John tried to reason with Mark, hoping to negotiate a solution that wouldn't completely drain his finances or push him into further illegal activities. But Mark was unyielding, sensing John's desperation and exploiting it to his advantage. Every call and message from Mark was a reminder that John's time was running out, and he had to find a way to silence the threat once and for all. The pressure began to take a toll on John's mental state. He found himself looking over his shoulder constantly, fearing that Mark or someone else from his past would show up at any moment. The once confident and composed man was now a shadow of himself, riddled with guilt and fear. His ability to keep up the pretense of normalcy in front of Emily and the children was slipping, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they noticed. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in John's life reached a boiling point. The secret he had tried so hard to bury was now threatening to destroy everything, and John was running out of options. He had to make a decision: either find a way to deal with Mark permanently, or risk losing the life he had painstakingly built. But in his desperation, John's thoughts began to turn darker, setting the stage for the unimaginable choices he would soon make. As the days passed, John found himself sinking deeper into a pit of anxiety and paranoia. The reemergence of his former associate had shaken him to the core, bringing back memories he had spent years trying to suppress. The man's demands were simple yet insidious: money in exchange for silence. But John knew that paying him off would only buy temporary peace. The threat of exposure loomed over him like a dark cloud, and it was just a matter of time before everything he had worked for came crashing down. At home, John's behavior began to change noticeably. He became withdrawn, irritable, and jumpy. The slightest noise made him flinch, and he started to avoid eye contact, even with his own family. Emily, always perceptive, was the first to notice. At first, she attributed his mood swings to stress from work, but soon it became apparent that something far more serious was troubling him. John's nights were sleepless, filled with pacing back and forth in the dimly lit living room, going over scenarios in his mind. He started drinking heavily, seeking solace at the bottom of a bottle, but the alcohol only served to amplify his fears. His mind raced with dark thoughts, imagining every possible way his secret could be uncovered and the consequences that would follow. Emily's concern grew with each passing day. She attempted to talk to John, to get him to open up, but he brushed her off, snapping at her and insisting that everything was fine. But everything was far from fine. Emily began to keep a closer eye on John, observing his every move, trying to understand what was eating away at him. It wasn't long before she started to connect the dots. John's late-night phone calls, the sudden appearance of large withdrawals from their bank account, and the cryptic messages he tried to hide. Driven by a mix of worry and suspicion, Emily decided to do some investigating of her own. She went through John's belongings, looking for any clues that could explain his erratic behavior. What she found was more than she could have ever imagined. Old documents and letters, hidden in the back of a drawer, detailed John's involvement in a crime from years ago, a crime that could destroy their lives if it came to light. Emily was horrified and confused. How could the man she loved and trusted have kept such a terrible secret from her? Her mind raced with questions and fears. She knew she had to confront John, but she also knew that doing so could push him further into the dark spiral he was already descending. Meanwhile, John's paranoia reached new heights. He became convinced that someone was watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His thoughts grew increasingly erratic, and he started to see Emily's growing curiosity as a threat. He was losing control, and the fear of losing his family and freedom consumed him. Every day, he edged closer to a breaking point, where reason would give way to desperation, setting the stage for the catastrophic events that were about to unfold. The night it all came crashing down was one of the most harrowing moments of John's life. The tension in the house had been building for weeks, and the air was thick with unease. Emily, driven by her growing suspicions, had been quietly investigating John's past, uncovering snippets of information that didn't align with the man she thought she knew. Each piece of the puzzle brought her closer to a truth she wasn't prepared to face, but felt compelled to uncover. That evening, as the children were tucked into bed, Emily sat in the living room, a stack of papers and printouts on the coffee table. John entered the room, noticing her somber expression and the documents spread before her. His heart raced, knowing that confrontation was imminent. He tried to mask his fear, but Emily's resolute gaze pierced through his facade. "We need to talk," Emily said, her voice steady but tinged with a mix of anger and disappointment. "I found out about your past, John, about the man you used to be." John's stomach churned. He felt cornered, the walls closing in around him. "Emily, it's not what you think," he stammered, attempting to deflect and deny. But Emily was unwavering. "Not what I think," she retorted, holding up a document that detailed his involvement in the crime he had so desperately tried to hide. "I gave you everything, John, our marriage, our children, and you've been lying to us all along." The argument escalated, voices rising as years of buried secrets erupted to the surface. Emily demanded answers, her trust in John shattered. She accused him of endangering their family by not coming clean, of dragging them into a mess they didn't deserve. John, on the other hand, felt trapped, unable to find a way out without losing everything he held dear. The fight reached a fever pitch, and in a moment of sheer panic, John lost control. Overwhelmed by the fear of his secret being exposed and the life he had built crumbling to pieces, he lashed out. Emily never saw it coming. One moment she was shouting, the next, silence filled the room as she lay lifeless on the floor. John stood over her, breathing heavily, the weight of what he had done crashing down upon him. Panic set in, but it was already too late. His mind raced through the potential consequences: prison, disgrace, the loss of his children. He knew the only way to prevent his downfall was to eliminate all evidence of his crime, including his own family. He moved quickly, but with a heavy heart, entering the children's bedrooms where Sarah and Michael slept peacefully, unaware of the horror unfolding. The thought of harming his children made him sick, but in his twisted reasoning, it seemed like the only way to save them from the stigma of their father's actions. One by one, John ended their lives, tears streaming down his face as he silenced their innocent breaths. When it was over, the house was engulfed in a chilling stillness. John sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the devastating consequences of his actions, knowing he had crossed a line from which there was no return. The aftermath of the murders left the entire community in a state of shock and disbelief. News of the brutal killings spread rapidly, casting a dark shadow over the once idyllic neighborhood. Neighbors and friends who had always seen John as a devoted husband and father struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the monster who had committed such an unthinkable act. In the days following the discovery of the bodies, the police worked tirelessly to piece together the events that led to the tragedy. Investigators combed through John's background, uncovering details of his secret past that he had kept hidden from everyone, including Emily. The revelation that John had been involved in a serious crime before meeting Emily was a turning point in the investigation. It provided a motive, shedding light on why he felt compelled to commit the murders. As the investigation progressed, the community mourned the loss of Emily, Sarah, and Michael. Memorials sprang up outside the family home with flowers, candles, and notes expressing sorrow and support for the victims. Vigils were held, where tearful friends and neighbors gathered to remember the lives that had been tragically cut short. The pain was palpable, and the question on everyone's mind was how such a horrifying event could have happened right under their noses. John's arrest came swiftly. He was found hiding in a nearby town, disheveled and defeated, with no intention of escaping justice. The trial that followed became a media sensation, drawing attention from across the country. The courtroom was filled with a mix of grief and anger, as family members of Emily and the children sought justice, while the public tried to understand the depths of John's depravity. During the trial, prosecutors laid out the evidence methodically, detailing John's descent into paranoia and fear after his former associate reappeared. They presented the letters and messages that had been exchanged, showing how John's secret past was being used as leverage against him. Witnesses testified about the changes they had observed in John's behavior in the weeks leading up to the murders, painting a picture of a man unraveling under the pressure. John's defense attempted to argue that he was not in his right mind, that he had been driven to the edge by threats and fear. However, the jury found little sympathy for a man who had taken the lives of his wife and children in cold blood. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. John was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a small consolation to those who had lost so much. As John began his sentence, the community slowly tried to heal. The house where the murders took place was eventually sold. Its dark history, a painful reminder of the fragility of human nature. Over time, the story of John, Emily, Sarah, and Michael became a cautionary tale, a somber reminder of the dangers of secrets and the devastating consequences they can bring. The scars left by the tragedy remained, etched into the hearts of those who had known and loved the family, forever altering the fabric of their lives.